So I recently came across a very interesting movie, Panatos Cosmatos Beyond the Black Rainbow. Now, I have an affinity for weird, surrealistic, or bizarre fantasy films, and this one definitely made the list. And boy, was I blown away by this one. The plot is deceptively simple, and I won't give away too much of it here. In the 1960s, an ambitious and idealistic Dr. Mercurio Arborea founded the Arborea Institute with the goal in mind of achieving a better tomorrow with its participants, finding a way towards perfect happiness. His pitch with this idea is played at the beginning of the movie, and Dr. Arborea appears to be a well-intentioned and intelligent man, but we can already kind of tell by Cosmatos's lighting and his moody retro synth music, which I'll get to in a minute, that not everything is destined to go well with this idea. Then we fast forward to 1983, one year before, well, and then we followed this new character, Dr. Barry Nile, as he carries out a series of weird and creepy interviews with a young woman known as Alina, who appears to have psychic abilities, but she's kept in this near constant state of that's kind of a stuporous, barely conscious state with an array of vaguely defined mechanisms of the Institute. So then what happened to Dr. Arborea? What about his glorious vision for the future? Did something go wrong? Clearly something went wrong. And so what, And right away we begin to sympathize with Alina, who has been in this weird and mysterious institute apparently for her whole life. Although very much of this movie is implied rather than explained outright, which I really like about it. And in any case, we begin to sympathize with her because she's pitted against this intimidating Dr. Nile, who seems to be in charge of the Arborea Institute, and he's clearly not got her best interests in mind. None of this is stated explicitly. It's all implied and insinuated through very spare dialogue and a lot of expert acting. Now, I could go on here, but I think it would do an injustice to the movie if you haven't seen it yet to not say anything else. I think movies like this are best entered into with as little foreknowledge as possible. And so when I saw that this movie was on a list of weird sci-fi movies, I deliberately avoided learning anything at all about the plot other than some young woman is locked in this weird institute and she's trying to get out. That was all I knew. Now, I'll warn you, this movie's not really for everybody. It's kind of divisive. So I'm going to explain what I think will help you decide whether or not it's for you. It's very slow, it's very contemplative, and it is drenched in atmosphere, mood, and long shots that are deliberately composed to draw you into this sort of almost hypnotic state of immersion. And it is really weird. The visual style might best be described as, imagine if David Lynch crash landed on Solaris. That is, you have these really mesmerizing imagery of, say, a Kubrick or a Tarkovsky, coupled with haunting and often unexplained nightmarish images. And I absolutely love it. If you couple this with the soundtrack and the color palette and the lens choices that deliberately evoke the 80s sci-fi and sci-fantasy, and music that sounds like it could have been composed by a Tangerine Dream if they got lost in a John Carpenter movie. So what is this movie really about? Like if all of that appeals to you, then you're probably going to want to see it. But if you haven't seen it, I'm about to get into some spoilers, and trust me, if you're not turned off by this, and if it sounds interesting, you don't want to know anything else. Just go watch it, and then you can come back and watch the rest of the video. Still with me? Okay. So one of the reasons this movie really got to me was because of the setting and the historical issues that was obviously being dealt with here. Cosmatos could have set this movie in the far future, and that would have been interesting, but then it wouldn't have really been connected to anything emotionally or historically real. It would have been more of a speculative exercise. So why then did he set his movie in the 60s and then later the 80s? I think it was because he was commenting on the really weird history of the last century, much of which I saw firsthand because I was only a little bit younger than Alina at that time. Alina, I think, is about 17 in this movie, and I was about 13. In any case, it was my parents' generation that were the hippies who wanted to tune in, turn on, and drop out and create free love communes and change the world with peace and harmony and happiness. I lived in one of these little hippie communes for a little while. As a kid, I remember it very well. I remember people talking about wanting to create a world of peace and love, much like what Mercurio arborea, a symbolically rich name if I ever heard one, wanted to create and craft. So then what happened? Or should I say, what the F happened? Because in just 15 years, all of that stuff was tossed aside, and we wound up with the ultra materialistic, greed is right 1980s, complete with paranoid Reaganomics and a reactionary culture shift towards control and shame and repression, and Mike makes right morality. But Cosmatos is not content to simply demonize this movement. I think that would have been preachy and oversimple. There's more going on here. And he's sharp enough to connect the dots and to say something I think is rather profound and very resonant with me, especially because I lived during the era in which he's set this movie, and he's commenting on it in images and metaphors, of course. But of course, that's my thing. So, I got that on that deep level. And it's really through the character of Dr. Nile that represents the radical change that happened to the hippie boomers. And Elena represents the Gen X children of my generation that's kind of suffered the consequences, if you will. Not to demonize the boomers, everybody dunks on them, but I'm just saying that as a cultural movement, it's very mystifying that we went from free love and peace on earth and everything else to the hyper reactionary culture that wound up just a few years later. So on a deep level, I really kind of got this film because because in a way I kind of lived this, not at the level of torment and horror the movie depicts, of course. But, my parents were a part of that dropping out movement. And I lived, like I said, in a commune for a while. Until suddenly I didn't. And suddenly my elders were all talking about the mighty buck and chasing Amway dreams and worshiping the lifestyles of the rich and famous. I mean, what the heck, man? So very quickly I was on Elena's side as a promising youth damaged by the ill-fated, overweening ideals of her predecessors. But Cosmatos, again, he depicts this not so much as a slasher or a straightforward good guy, bad guy thing, but as a tragedy because and it's in the way that you see the transformation of Nile. He's the most interesting character here. Yes, he is a horrible human being, but he's not a really straightforward victim, a villain. He was a victim as well, and almost as much as Elena is. And you see this at the midpoint of the movie. We see how he comes in with big ideals and naive and wanting to do good. And he goes on this journey that Dr. Arborea crafted, a kind of spiritual journey that involves drugs and a whole host of other things that are never explicitly described. But rather than show it exactly as it happened, rather we see it more from a subjective point of view through a really long and wordless and haunting journey. He goes down the rabbit hole, if you will, in the name of peace, love, and harmony into this phantasmagoric hellscape of very disturbing and baffling images. And this long wordless sequence tells us the story in pure images and music, forcing us to go on this terrifying transformation. It's as if to say that the sin committed by Arborea and his colleagues was one of trying to almost arrogate the very power of the gods. And for it, all they saw was what lies beyond the so-called black rainbow, which is just an abyss of pure horror. What Nile becomes as a result of this is a monster. And he's barely concealed in the first act. And this is where a stroke of genius, I think, on Cosmatos' part, is that we are introduced to Nile already after the transformation. We don't know what has happened to him, but we know something ain't right with this guy. And a lot of it boils down to Michael Rogers' incredible performance. He is able to convey multiple layers of emotion all at once. And you can see early on, even if you don't know why, that he is very disturbed and he's barely able to conceal all that is left of him, which is pure primitive id, dark, unalloyed aggression and predatory desire. Until the final act, which after Avoria's death, he takes off his masks, as it were, and he starts to act on these urges. And he starts coming after Alina. She thankfully manages to figure out how to get away from him, but has to go through a series of terrifying obstacles, many of them completely unexplained and bizarre. Presumably, these are experiments that went awry in the institute itself. More failed experiments, trying to become and achieve some kind of state of blissful happiness, and all it did was create these horrors. So then she escapes, and when she does, she winds up in a 90s suburb. So did she really escape? Is the nightmare actually over? Or have we simply gone from one prison to another? And then to add even further mystery, there's a post-credit scene, which is really just one shot on the carpet of a small toy that mimics one of the weird robotic-like creatures that lives in the Institute. So what's that all about? I have no idea. And I love that. Absolutely love it. This movie will keep me thinking about it for a long time. I really like movies that do that. Is this movie for everybody? Absolutely not. If you're wanting a straightforward narrative that's fairly easy to comprehend, and you know which sides to root for, even if there's some depth to it, it's still not that kind of movie at all. It's a movie that tells the story and implies it through images, and it does it in a very kind of slow and deliberate and mesmerizing kind of way. Many people, I think, will get very kind of frustrated with it and impatient with it. But if you like that kind of stuff, if you like getting kind of drawn into this eerie fever dream of an experience, then you will find, I think, the themes and images of it staying in your head for a long time. So for me, it gets 5 Dreamstones out of 5. So I'll catch you next time, gang.